There is not a single line in Houseki no Kuni that has no meaning. Ichikawa meticulously places dialogue in order for it to have meaning or point to something in the story, but it's always in vague terms. There's a line that Benito says that gave one of my friends pause as they were reading it. "The day you returned, you also fell into the sea, but your powder didn't wash away." They turned to me and asked if this line was significant, and at the time I was like, I'm not sure why that was pointed out. But now, I have this video. The powder in Houseki no Kuni shows the values in Kongo's society, the foil relationship between Phos and Cairngorm, and brings out Phos's shame. The powder became a culture among the gems because of Red Diamond, the first gem, who wanted to look like Kongo. This soon became a strict rule among all the gems, and was quick to become a standard of uniformity among the gems to hide the differences between them. Because in trying to be like Kongo, they hid the original rock that they were made of. They hid who they are. The lore book states that the powder takes a lot of time and effort to obtain, and to the gems it's pretty rare. This is why they try to use it sparingly and discourage people from doing any activities that'll mess up the powder, because then they'd have to use this rare material that they have. The lore book also states that it helps against salt adhesion of the gem's skin. However, it also does detract a little bit from the gems getting sunlight, but it says that it's not significant enough. The powder also represents a constant need to please Kongo and others in general, especially when Phos goes down to the ocean and says to Ventrigosus that they wouldn't like the look of Phos if Phos did not have their powder. And so that shows that there's a shame in seeing like a gem without their powder, but this is Phos's view of themselves, that their gem, the part that is them, the stone that they were made of, is inherently shameful and ugly. Like, that's what Phos is saying in that line, is that the powder is there to be like Kongo, the powder is there to be like everyone else, the powder is there to hide their stone that they intrinsically view as less than. Phos and the other gems also use the powder to hide their cracks, to hide that they're broken, to hide the shame of being brittle, because the gems are praised based on their hardness level. So having cracks or showing that they have broken before is probably not desired, and that's why the powder is there, to hide that they were ever broken in the first place. In Kongo's society, Kongo is the standard, and that is because Kongo is unbreakable, and the gems value hardness above all else. That's why there is this sort of hierarchy in hardness levels, and that's why Phos sees themselves as so shameful, and that's why the cracks that they hide with the powder are hidden, because they want to be like Kongo, they want to be unbreakable. When Phos yells at Kongo to break, and he breaks with just a word, that it's so powerful, because that is the crumbling, the literal crumbling of the standard of the society that Kongo built, and now Phos doesn't know where else to go. We know that the gems don't necessarily need to be in this form, and they sacrifice everything, or, they'll sacrifice the rest of their hair or something like that just to maintain the form that Kongo puts them in, because, again, they want that uniformity, they want to be in the group, they want to be perfect, in a sense. They want to fit into society. In fact, Phos's shame is just a huge theme throughout the story in general. For instance, when the second Snail King praises Phos, Phos can do nothing but, be shameful of their past actions and putting themselves down. Because even when Phos's uniqueness is being praised on, they want to stay in the group, they want to be uniform, they want to not stick out, which again is kind of more collectivist mentality, which Kongo society is a lot collectivist, and that's supposed to be in contrast with Acmea society, which is more individualistic. So when Phos goes to the moon, Phos sees Acmea society, where things are constantly changing, the uniqueness is valued, and pleasing others is displayed in constant improvement, rather than staying the same as everyone else. Both Phos and Cairngorm are from a society that values conformity, a society that values fitting in at all cost, a society that does not praise differences. When they get to the moon, they both want to fit in, and they take Acmea's direction in how that happens. Acmea goes in different directions with both of them. With Phos, Acmea dresses Phos up to look more Lunarian, to look less gem-like, and he adheres the powder permanently on Phos's body, permanently ingrained in Phos's self, and Phos didn't even know about it until Benito pointed it out. Cairngorm's foil relationship to Phos starts with the fact that when they become like Lunarian, because I believe post-moon Cairngorm is supposed to represent the Lunarian mentality that Phos never adopts. And I believe Acmea pushes Phos to never adopt these Lunarian values, because if Phos is incorporated to Lunarian society, Phos would not go on to become the prayer machine that Acmea needs Phos to be. Cairngorm accepts the Lunarian standard. Cairngorm accepts Acmea's standard. Cairngorm rejects anything that has to do with Congo's standard. Because Cairngorm wants to rebel and find a new identity in being Lunarian, they want to forget that old identity. However, in doing so, they just take on a new standard, like Phos does. The scene where Cairngorm grinds their arm into powder shows that they reject their past, and they reject change. They want to keep things exactly how they are now, which is how Lunarians are. They do have improvements, they do change things uniquely, because they want variety, but they don't treat any internal needs of the people. They just keep things the same way as they are. They find new distractions, but they never do anything to progress themselves. They do things to progress society, they do things to progress the technology that they've built, but they don't take an introspective look at themselves, like how Cairngorm prevents their past. They prevent looking at things that remind them of the Congo society, because they don't want to be reminded of who they used to be. They don't want to be reminded that they're broken. Just like in Congo society, instead of powder, they use distractions to forget about who they are. So Cairngorm goes in the opposite direction of Phos. Cairngorm does not hide their gem self. Instead, Cairngorm takes off the powder and displays the stone that gives them an identity. But because their name has changed from Ghost to Cairngorm, their name, their identity, no longer fits with the gem. That's why Cairngorm changing identity in their name makes them taking off their powder less impactful. Because if Phos did that and called themselves Phosphophyllite, we would be like, Phos is finally accepting who they are. They're finally accepting the gem part of them as them. Cairngorm doesn't hide the stone that they were born with. They don't hide the gem that is not like Congo. They instead prop up their gem as something to be praised, as something that makes them unique, as something that makes them interesting. When Ghost was taken away, the powder was taken away with Ghost, and Cairngorm was left alienated by society in art, just by the fact that they look in contrast to all the other gems. It was only after they reformed their identity that they put the powder back on to fit to Phos's standard, for how Phos wanted them to be, for how Phos wanted them to act. The powder is a symbol that they are reforming into Congo's society, and that they are reforming into what Phos wants them to be. This is why when Acmea removes Ghost from Cairngorm, the powder is removed again, but this time Cairngorm doesn't put the powder back on. And we know, because Phos has permanent powder, that the moon has the capability of putting the powder back on Cairngorm. But at this point, Cairngorm rejects any additions to their body, even their past limbs. In fact, they show off their body more, clothing-wise, because they are not ashamed of the gem that makes them up. This is in contrast to Phos, because I'm saying that the powder greater explains the foil relationship between Phos and Cairngorm. Phos is in permanent powder that adheres to their skin. Cairngorm stripped the powder away in order to show their gem self more, in order to be more connected to themselves, whereas Phos is trying to do the opposite. Phos is trying to permanently hide the gem that they used to be, and they're not even made up of entirely that gem anymore. Cairngorm wears more revealing clothing to display the gem that they have, or they wear transparent clothing to display it. Phos's first moon outfit is more similar to the gems. It's kind of just like towing the lines between gem and Lunarian, and that's kind of the point. The second moon outfit that Phos has is way more Lunarian. It's going completely in the opposite direction of the style that is on Earth. And Phos is almost completely covered in clothing, because they're wearing a complete one-suit that extends into shoes. And you cannot see any gem part of them except for their head and their gold arms, if that counts. And it shows that Phos is hiding. They're hiding who they are. And even the mishmash shapes, Phos is hiding them, whereas Cairngorm is not. In fact, in Phos's invasion outfit, which is similar to their previous moon outfit, but there are a few differences, like, you know, it's more uneven to kind of go with that, like, more eerie vibe that Phos puts off in the invasion arc, but also Phos has an opening in their chest and their back, which shows their torso of cracks, the powdered cracks of phosphofolite that they have. I've thought about this quite a bit, and I believe that Phos's outfit changes because now everything is more covered except for phosphofolite, but it's not that Phos is displaying it. Phos is sort of displaying their brokenness at this point, because it kind of is a last thing to say, like, I don't care about Congo, I don't care about fitting into the gem society, I will show my cracks, I will show how broken I am, and then, you know, Congo breaks and all that. But it also shows that they don't care to protect their original self, because their original self is so brittle. It's kind of showing the problems. Their original self with the cracks that are across their chest is that their original self is so brittle that they don't want to protect it with clothing, which the lore book states that the Lunarian clothing that they wear during the invasion arc and during the other things is supposed to make it easier for them to collect the gem bodies. And so by doing this, it kind of shows that if Phos breaks, which Phos did, it also might be hinting at the fact that the Lunarians aren't going to go and collect Phos. The reason why Phos does not have clothing around their torso is not only to display their brokenness, but also so that when they get collected, they're hoping that those pieces are scattered or left. They do not care. I say that as if they get to choose their clothing. I'm saying that their clothing choices in the manga can reflect Phos's mental state. I'm over-analyzing things, as always, you know. Another foil thing between Phos and Cairngorm is Karen follows exactly to whatever the person who's in charge of their standard says, whereas Phos wants to follow that standard. Because of their inherent flaws, because of some things out of their control, it's really hard for them to adhere to the standards. Like to Congo's standards of hardness, they just weren't born with a high hardness. With Acmea's standards of becoming a Lunarian, their preconditioned life as a gem and their drive to change is preventing them from being fully Lunarian. And so Phos doesn't fit in anywhere. The reason why Phos rebels a bit between Congo and Acmea, except Acmea kind of allows Phos to rebel. Like, at the end, Phos is calling more of the shots, and Acmea is fine with it because that's part of its plan anyway. But the reason why Phos rebels, the reason why Phos orders from the people who define Phos's standard, is because Phos cannot fit those standards inherently. Because of their mental state, and because of who they physically are. Because their physical and mental state are linked. Because they are not fully gem, they're not fully Lunarian, they're not fully Admiralist, they're human. And that's the problem, is that they do not fit into any of them. And so the powder between Phos and Cairngorm is supposed to make Phos feel more alienated, because Acmea took that choice away from Phos to get rid of their powder and show who they really are, uniquely are. And Lunarians are more about showing themselves, showing like fake versions of themselves, but they desire to show a persona. Phos can't even show a persona because Acmea took that choice away from Phos by adhering the powder to their skin and never being able to show any unique parts about them. Even though Phos is still a very unique gem, we know that. And I believe that turning all the societies into Lunarian really propels Phos's alienation, not only from Cairngorm, but from the rest of the cast, because the powder on Phos's skin is a connection to gem society. It's a connection to what Congo built, it's a connection to Congo. And everyone then rejects that standard when they become Lunarian, even Congo. Phos is left on Earth, alone, adhering to a standard that no one else accepts anymore. And the only way that Phos got past this loneliness, this alienation, this chasing of unrealistic standards, was to let go of every single thing that turns them away from themselves. In the final chapters, Phos had to get rid of all the other materials that weren't themselves. And it was at that point that we finally got to see their gem self again. And it's only when Phos is stripped of all the standards of humanity, of all the humanness, of all the desire for perfection, the desire to please dead people. When Phos is stripped of all of that, they're able to find themselves. They're able to find an identity that isn't tied to misery. And that's why Beneto's line about the powder not washing away is significant, as all the lines in Houseki no Kuni are. Because it allowed me to point out this amazing foil relationship that isn't really obvious on a first read. And I love that Ichikawa is able to take a small detail like the powder culture that explains the foils and parallels between Phos and Cairngorm. If you think about it, Cairngorm adhering to Phos's standard to be like Antark, the fact that Phos didn't try to stop that shows that Phos didn't see that as a bad thing. And that's because later, after Cairngorm and Phos's relationship is completely ruined, it is made more clear that Phos is doing the same thing with all the other characters, trying to adhere to all the different standards. And I believe that Cairngorm, trying to be like Antark, was supposed to be a small parallel for Phos doing the same thing on a larger scale. And so it's by Powder that these two characters' identity issues and shame are displayed to us in a beautiful metaphorical way.